Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
My name is Justin Holland, and for the first 26 years of my life, I considered myself an ordinary guy. I am 5'11" tall and weigh 180 pounds, with brown hair, green eyes, and a decent appearance. There was nothing particularly remarkable about me, but I had two strengths that set me apart from the general crowd: above-average intelligence and kindness. I treat others with respect and avoid gossip, so I've always had a lot of friends. Moreover, I consider it a priority to be kind and help others whenever possible. I rarely lose my temper, and when I do, it only happens when I'm pushed to my limits. Self-doubt and a certain state of mind have always been two of my weaknesses, but when I flare up, it turns into uncontrollable rage. Fortunately, this has only happened 3 times in my entire life. On those 3 occasions, someone was admitted to the hospital, and one of them was me. My wife, Ginger Holland, has discovered another of my main weaknesses, which she calls rating. Ginger is also an ordinary woman, but I find her more attractive and alluring than most. Like me, she is generally kind and friendly towards others, although not to the same extent. When Ginger and I got married at the age of 21, we both had intimate experiences under our belts. We were together for 5 years until we turned 26. We had a great time together and seemed to be happy in our relationship, but everything changed after Ginger attended her friend Ashley's bachelorette party, where she was a bridesmaid, along with their mutual friend Sile. Unlike Ginger and me, Ashley was more daring and adventurous. Sile, on the other hand, was incredibly brave. She possessed both courage and stubbornness, which sometimes forced her to make impulsive decisions. Of all the people we knew, she and her husband Trent were the only ones who owned their own house. Although none of us were rich, we still managed to spend a whole Saturday having fun at Sile's house, starting at 10 o'clock in the morning. But things went wrong when Trent was asked to leave during the party after lunch. Trent, 2 other husbands, and I played a few games of tennis and went bowling in the early evening. Later, we all watched an action movie called Killer Chicks together. Around 10 p.m., Trent went to another husband's place to hang out at his apartment while waiting for a call from Sile. Meanwhile, I returned to our apartment, exhausted from the day's events. I dozed off on the couch while the TV played in the background. Suddenly, around 11:30 p.m., the phone rang, and I woke up abruptly. It was Sile on the other end. Her voice slurred as she greeted me. She told me that my wife had fainted. Without thinking, I rushed to the car and drove to Ginger. She wasn't the type to get drunk often, so I knew something must be wrong. I had seen her like this only twice before that evening. As expected, she had fainted. Without hesitation, I picked her up, grabbed her things, and loaded them into the car. I fastened my seatbelt and drove home. By the time we arrived at our apartment complex, Ginger had already recovered a little. Fortunately, I didn't have to carry her up the steep stairs to our apartment on the 2nd floor, but I still had to help her. Ginger was in a cheerful and mischievous state, as she had been the 2 other times I saw her intoxicated. The next morning, as expected, Ginger had a hangover. I tried to talk to her while she was still in bed, but all I heard was sound. She had nothing to tell me about the party. The only coherent words she uttered were a request to bring her pills and water. I searched the apartment for her purse, but I remembered she had left it in the car with her party bag. Pulling them out and rummaging through my own purse, I found her mobile phone and a bottle of pills. I took out 2 pills and poured a glass of cold water, then returned to the bedroom. "Thank you very much," Ginger said gratefully, reaching for the pills and the glass. She thanked me again when she swallowed the pills. I took the glass from her and asked if it would help her feel better. She mumbled, expressing hope that the pills would work. They should have relieved her hangover quickly, but she still needed rest. I offered to help her if she needed anything else. "Can you do me a favor?" Ginger asked, reaching out to gently stroke my cheek. "Could you stroke my head until I fall asleep?" I grinned and replied, "Your wish is my command." For the next 10 minutes, I gently stroked her hair until she fell asleep. Then I got up and went to the kitchen. As I was sitting at the kitchen table reading the morning newspaper, Ginger's cell phone rang. I couldn't tell if it was a message or a call, as her phone made sounds different from mine. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up her phone, accidentally turning on the screen at the same time. A message from Sile appeared, written in her usual cryptic jargon and abbreviations. Despite this, I was able to make out the meaning of the message. This is important. Don't forget that your game sheet is in your bag. After finishing my conversation with the newspaper, I returned to reading, but Sal's message wouldn't leave my mind. I couldn't resist investigating further. I picked up my wife's abandoned bag and examined its contents. She had the typical things you'd expect from a bachelorette party, but when I dug deeper, I found 2 sheets of paper folded in half at the bottom. Both sides were filled with printed and handwritten words. I couldn't shake the feeling that by reading these papers, I was invading Ginger's personal space, but I rationalized it by telling myself that it wouldn't hurt to know. If I hadn't read them, I would have remained naive and ignorant. The first page was labeled Rating Game and contained a series of questions and statements written in Ginger's clear handwriting. Under each of them were grades written in what seemed to be someone else's handwriting, and at the very top was a general grade marked as AKA or 4+. Ginger's name wasn't on the form, but it was clear that she was the one who filled it out. Although I was haunted by the idea that I had invaded her personal life, curiosity got the better of me and all ethical considerations faded away. Most of the questions were about her perception and satisfaction with our relationship, and I couldn't resist reading them with a smile on my face. Questions like, is he affectionate? Only fueled my interest even more. Does he remember important dates? What qualities does he admire the most? Do you feel the same love for him as you did at the time of the wedding? The responses were mostly positive and complimentary towards me, with her trademark sense of humor and a few inside jokes known only to us. If only I hadn't stopped reading before I reached the end of the second sheet. The third page, however, contained questions and answers that were different from the previous ones. The first question was about the best intimate skill of her husband, and the answer was that I hugged Ginger like a big teddy bear. I continued reading, but the answers soon made my stomach churn. What are his most significant intimate flaws? Unfortunately, almost everything. How would you rate your husband's behavior in bed before you tied the knot? On a scale of 1 to 10? Maybe 2 or 3, but that's not why I married him. How would you rate his skills in bed now that you're married? Unfortunately, little has changed. Perhaps by 2+ points. The next question was, what was your best intimate experience after the wedding? Ginger wrote, during a business trip to Chicago, I had a one-night stand. But I had never been to Chicago. My mind went blank, and what followed is still a blur. I think I sat down on a chair, shed a few tears, and then went outside. The order of events is a little unclear, but I remember for sure that I almost fell down the stairs and tripped, hitting my knee on the railing. After spending several hours wandering the streets on foot, I realized that I had made a wise choice not to drive because my head was in chaos and I would most likely have had an accident. Until I came across the questions and answers on the third page of the Rating Game, I had sincerely believed that I had satisfied Ginger in an intimate way, that we were compatible, and that our relationship was exclusive. Lacking strong self-confidence, my self-esteem quickly collapsed. In fact, I was in a rather deplorable state. In the end, I got to my apartment around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, not knowing what to say to Ginger. I was at a loss and had never felt so confused in my life. When I entered the apartment, I found Ginger in the kitchen with Sile. Ginger was in tears, and they both looked scared. "Oh dear, where have you been? I was so worried," exclaimed Ginger, rushing to me and hugging me tightly around the neck. I remained completely motionless, like a statue, with my hands at my sides and a blank expression on my face. I noticed that there was no trace of the Rating Game left on the kitchen table. "I think I'll go," Sile muttered and left, relief showing on her face. Ginger finally pulled away from me, tears glistening in her eyes. I was still lost in my thoughts, wondering if she would decide to deal with the unspoken tension between us or leave it up to me. "What would you like me to cook for dinner?" asked Ginger, trying to sound cheerful. "I'll cook whatever you want. If we don't have it, I'll go and buy it." With a blank expression on my face, I asked for Italian sausage with pepper and onion and then sat down on a chair. The fact that I had actually answered the question seemed to amuse her. "Oh, great, honey," Ginger said. "I'll go get them right now. And at the same time I'll grab 6 cans of your favorite imported beer." She wiped her face, took the car keys, kissed me on the cheek, and hurried out the door. "I'll be back soon," she shouted. I asked for Italian sausage, knowing that we didn't have it at home, but it seemed like a win-win option. As soon as the door closed behind her, I started to pack my things. I made my choice. I couldn't keep pretending. I needed to pack enough clothes to get through a few nights while I looked for a new place to stay. I could spend one night on the couch in my office at work and then find a more permanent place. I assumed that by the time Ginger returned, I would be gone. She was quicker than I expected and came home faster than I anticipated. When Ginger noticed that I was zipping up one suitcase and the other was already standing by the door, she screamed, "What are you doing, Justin? Why are you packing?" I answered sharply, "I think you'll figure it out for yourself." Her jaw dropped at my response. She stood there, at a loss, not knowing what to do. "It was just a stupid game, honey. I was drunk, and you saw how out of my mind I was." "I didn't mean what I said," Ginger insisted. I stared into her eyes, feeling numb, and replied, "So, you didn't mean it when you said you loved me? You didn't mean it when you said I had 2 out of 10 points in bed? Or that one night stands made you happy? No one would lie about such things. It was just a stupid game." Ginger cried, "I don't care about any of this. I love you, and I want you to be the father of my children." Ginger screamed, venting her frustration, as I grabbed my suitcases and headed for the door. "You can't just walk away because of the game at the bachelorette party," she screamed, grabbing my arm and collapsing to the floor. Her scream echoed as she lay face down in the doorway, causing the other residents of our floor to look around in surprise. After taking a couple of steps up the stairs, I stopped and said calmly, "You deserve a husband who satisfies you. You don't need me." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw one of our neighbors rush to the figure lying in the entrance to our apartment. Her sobs created a ghostly background as I numbly got into the car and drove away. That Sunday evening, I spent time in my office, took a shower in the gym in the basement of the building, and changed my clothes. During the day, I sent all incoming calls to voicemail. I contacted a few single friends and found one who offered me a spare bedroom until I found a new place. Later in the afternoon, Sybil's husband, Trent, came to see me. "Can we talk in private, Justin?" he asked with a hesitant expression on his face. Oh great, I thought to myself. Now all the husbands from the bachelorette party know about my inappropriate behavior. I need to pack my things and leave town. Although I had a knot of anxiety in my stomach, I couldn't find a way out of this situation. I thought that if I talked to Trent, I could prevent future confrontations with other people, so I decided to go for it. We entered my office, and Trent closed the door behind us. "Listen, Justin," he began hesitantly. "I don't have all the details, but Sybil is very upset. She forced the women at the party to play some stupid game that she invented herself, and now claims that everyone was drunk and confused about whose sheets were being evaluated. It's all just a big mess, and she feels terribly guilty. Besides, she's very upset that you dumped Ginger and won't answer her calls." I could see how much Trent was worried, and I knew he was only here because he loved Sybil, so I kept silent and avoided looking into his eyes. Taking a deep breath, he spoke again. "Sybil is at your house right now. She says Ginger is in a bad way and can't go to work today, so Sybil decided not to go to work either." He paused, staring at me intently. "Can you handle it?" I know that everything Ginger said was just the result of drinking. I pulled myself together, fighting back tears, and finally met Trent's gaze. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly wishing he was somewhere else. "I'm really sorry," I said softly, feeling my insides tearing apart. I felt like I couldn't come to terms with it. I put my head on the table and, contrary to common sense, started crying like a child. I felt Trent's hand on my head as he muttered, "I'm sorry," and then I heard the door to my office open and close. For the next week, I went about my business without responding to Ginger's messages. I contacted Jessica Stearns, a family law attorney recommended to me by a corporate lawyer from my work. I told her that I wanted to leave as soon as possible and that I would probably give in financially. "How does your salary compare to her salary?" Jessica asked. I replied that it was about the same. I may earn a few thousand more a year, but I planned to change jobs as soon as the divorce was finalized. "I really need to break free," I said. Jessica seemed to understand me. "There should be no reason for alimony. Would you be interested in a consultation?" she asked. "No, I can't do this anymore," I muttered back. Judge Nur, one of the judges of the family law court, usually makes such a decision, she warned. "If we find ourselves in front of him, we may not have any options left." "Just do your best," I replied. I wrote out a check for her services and walked out the door. My friend, who was single, persuaded me to move in with him. He needed a neighbor to pay the rent, or else he would have had to move. He traveled a lot for work, and it was easy to find common ground with him, so I agreed. I had to start answering calls at work because customers were unhappy that their calls were going to voicemail during normal business hours. Ginger called often, especially after she received the divorce papers. It wasn't easy to have such conversations. Usually, after a few minutes of her crying and apologizing, I would tell her that I was in too much pain and that she would be better off without me, and then I would hang up. According to Murphy's Law, we should have gotten Judge Nur, and, of course, Murphy's Law always wins. Ginger was determined to schedule a consultation, and Jessica was powerless to intervene. The first consultation turned out to be one of the most painful experiences of my life. Ginger expressed a whirlwind of emotions, sometimes asking for forgiveness, then crying, then screaming, and criticizing me for not meeting her expectations as a man. She kept saying that she loved me, and that if I had honestly thought about the whole situation, I would have seen that I was a solid B-plus husband. But she destroyed the evidence of such an assessment on the same day I first saw it, without letting the consultant review it. Ginger also claimed that her brief affair in Chicago was the only case of infidelity during our marriage, insisting that she was drunk and deeply regretted it, promising that it would never happen again. These comments were like a dart to me. I participated in the session as little as possible. Fortunately, I was mostly in a daze because otherwise, I might have burst into tears. I noticed the consultant's sympathetic looks. The consultant ended the session 10 minutes early and asked me to stay for a personal conversation. As soon as Ginger left the room, she immediately got down to business. "Justin, I think you have clinical depression," she said. "It seems that you were not confident before, and this situation has completely upset you. I don't think marriage counseling will help you much, but I strongly recommend that you see a psychiatrist. Will you tell the judge about this?" I asked. "Here is a list of psychiatrists I recommend," the consultant said, opening a drawer, taking out a printed sheet, and handing it to me. "It's very important that you seek help. You can't handle it on your own," she added. The following week, Judge Costner overturned the consultation order, despite Ginger's objections. He advised her to continue seeing a counselor on her own. It seems she followed his advice because after a week, she stopped opposing the divorce. Naturally, I didn't go to Ashley's wedding, and Ginger apparently decided not to be a bridesmaid. Ginger was shocked that I needed only a few items of clothing and sports equipment from our house and savings. She offered photos, souvenirs, various items, and even money from our checking account or bonds that we held together, but both Jessica and I kindly declined all her offers. She was very upset by my decision not to take any of our wedding albums with me. Interestingly, Ginger never raised the issue of alimony, even before my divorce was finalized. I decided to leave my job and move. I got a job in a new, responsible position that required 80 hours of work every week, but at the same time, it offered a lucrative salary. I had no personal life, and all my days revolved around work, food, sleep, and exercise. Over the next 2 years, I saved up a significant amount of money. During this time, I didn't go on a single date and didn't engage in any intimate activity. I don't know how long I can maintain this lifestyle, but the work didn't bring relief. After 3 hours spent in the gym, I decided to clean up the apartment. While sorting through some things, I accidentally dropped the folder, and the list of psychiatrists I had received from the marriage counselor slipped out of it. It was something I had never thought about before. Sitting at the kitchen table, I burst into tears while holding the paper in my hands. At that moment, I decided to take my life into my own hands. The next day, I contacted Dr. Winston, and we scheduled a consultation for the following day. I decided to take one of the rare days off from work over the past 2 years to meet with him. After learning about my experiences in life after the divorce, particularly the complete absence of any intimate activity, he immediately informed me, "I'm afraid I can't help you, Mr. Holland," he said without hesitation. "You should see a therapist to solve intimate problems, and I highly recommend Dr. Susan Jenkins. She's both a psychologist and a licensed therapist, and I believe she can really help you. I'll call her right now." "When can you meet her?" "I want to do it as soon as possible," I replied. "I feel ready, and I don't want to delay or look for excuses to avoid it." On Friday of the same week, I met with Susan because Dr. Winston insisted that I go to her. She was an impressive woman with striking blue eyes, light brown hair, a graceful figure, and a keen sense of fashion. The chic glasses gave her appearance a fashionable touch rather than making her look older. I think she was about 50 years old. She had a report from Dr. Winston, and she immediately started talking therapy. Although I had some doubts when I first came in, Susan made me feel comfortable. For the first 10 minutes, she noted that my situation was unique, which was what I expected. By the end of the second session, however, she had developed a comprehensive plan of action for me. "I'm sure this will work, Justin," Susan said, beaming. She got up from her chair, walked over to the couch where I was sitting, took my hands, and pulled me closer, hugging me. After releasing me, she looked into my eyes and promised, "I assure you, in 6 months, all your problems will be behind you. Our next session will last 2 hours and will include time with Nain." "Who is she?" I asked. "She is a practical psychotherapist for intimate issues," Susan explained. "I am a conversational therapist, so I keep some distance in our relationship. Nain, on the contrary, will communicate with you on a more intimate level. By cooperating, we can find a solution," Susan said with a smile. I apologized for my rudeness, but is Nain from an escort service? I asked, feeling embarrassed. "Of course not," she replied, laughing. "There's no comparison between them. One of the key differences is that the practical services are aimed at solving medical problems, not at providing intimate pleasure, and they are limited to a certain number of sessions. Escort girls work without licenses and are illegal in many regions, while intimate therapists are licensed and work legally," Susan said with a smile. "I'm sorry for the stupid question," I replied. "This is not a stupid question at all. Many people ask this," Susan said, answering a possible concern. "I'm very glad that you brought up this topic. I would like to inform you that in the next session, you will need to be tested for intimacy-transmitted diseases. In addition, we will provide you with a certificate of Nain's health," Susan explained. She leaned over to her desk, pulled out a printed sheet listing 3 labs, one of which was conveniently located just 3 blocks from my office. "Any of these labs will do for you. Just present this sheet with my details as they are familiar with my queries, and they will send the results directly to me by email," Susan said. "Thank you," I said. "I want to say that despite the high cost and the fact that your health insurance does not cover it, I strongly recommend this treatment," Susan said. "Money is not a problem for me right now," I replied, smiling. "All I want is to get well," I added. Susan hugged me again and whispered, "You're going to do great, Justin. I promise." The next day, I took some tests. I tried to banish thoughts about the next session from my mind, but as soon as I had a free minute, they occupied my thoughts. I tried to relax as much as possible when I came to Susan's office for a follow-up session a week later. "I'm so glad to see you, Justin," Susan said, greeting me. "The results of your STD test are in perfect order. Let me introduce you to Nain, and then we'll talk about the procedures." I stood there while Susan pressed a button on her desk, and a pleasant-looking woman, probably in her 30s, came in from the next room. She was wearing only a bathrobe and slippers. "Justin, this is Nain." "Nain, meet Justin," Susan introduced us. Nain greeted me with a warm smile and a gentle, almost electric touch as she took my hand in hers. "It's very nice to meet you, Justin," Nain said. I could tell by her behavior that she was sincere. Although I had met many women who were more conventionally beautiful than Nain, she had a certain charm that made her much more attractive than her appearance would suggest. While Susan was talking, I kept glancing at Nain, now directly, now out of the corner of my eye, but I wasn't paying attention to what was being said. When I caught what Susan was suggesting, I felt a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. "Nain, why don't you take Justin to your room now and come back in about an hour?" Susan said. Nain took my hand and led me into the next room. The room was softly lit. There was a bed with pillows on the floor, and gentle music was playing in the background. A large screen on the wall showed a series of intimate images that changed every few seconds. "Please take off your shoes and socks, Justin," Nain said with a smile. As soon as I obeyed, we settled cross-legged on the pillows facing each other, and my arms closed around hers. We chatted casually on various topics, and she often smiled or laughed, which helped me feel comfortable in her presence. Nain moved so easily into the therapeutic aspect of our meeting that I felt calm, at first, until I realized that she was completely without anything. "Justin, the first thing we're going to do is explore my sensitive, intimate areas," Nain said. "In fact, this is a biology lesson, but with a live participant. Let's both stand up, and I'll guide your hands," Nain said. When we stood up, I got a good look at her figure. She had what many men would call a slightly fuller figure, and she was about 4 inches shorter than me. Speaking softly and without any judgment, she gently passed my right hand, then my left. The feeling was incredible. Nain actually gave me a lesson as a biologist. I stayed fully clothed while she talked to me about important aspects of her body. From time to time, she checked my physiological reactions to her explanations and seemed pleased with my answers. "Can you confirm that everything was good, Justin? Can you say that?" Nain asked. Of course, I replied. Then she asked, would you like to be the one to make me feel that, Justin? I hesitated but finally admitted, yes, I would really like to. Then we'll talk about it in the next session, she said with a serious expression on her face. Nain smiled. I'm going to pack my things and take you to Susan's, she said. Nain gradually put on a bathrobe, her only clothes, and I watched her with interest. She took my hand and led me back to Susan's office. I stared at my watch in a daze. A whole hour had passed, although it seemed to me that only a few minutes had gone by. Are you making any progress? Asked Susan. Yes, quite a bit, I replied. I think we should give Justin some written material to think about, and we can continue next week, Nain added. That sounds great, Susan replied. See you next week, Nain added with a smile, gently squeezing my hands before leaving the room. Do you agree with Nain about the significant progress? Asked Susan. I truly believe that she can inspire me, and it's hard for me to imagine that nothing will work out with her, I replied, smiling back. We continued to discuss various topics, and then Susan handed me a booklet that she had written with Nain. It described what to expect in the future, including details of sessions, views on intimate life, and analysis of various intimate techniques and scenarios. I expressed my gratitude, and when the 2-hour session came to an end, I realized that after it, I felt unexpectedly exhausted. I had a lot to think about before our meeting next week. Nain continued to occupy my thoughts. Her style was both sensual and intimate, but at the same time, practical. One thing was for sure, I was looking forward to our meeting next week. As soon as we entered her room, that's beginning. We listened to the material from the first week, after which she guided me through the techniques for the next stage. Nain shared her thoughts and openly expressed her sincere reaction to what I was doing, which made this experience very enjoyable for me. She emphasized that every woman is unique and taught me which techniques are most likely to enhance my partner's pleasure and which ones should be avoided. Once again, the time spent with Nain flew by unnoticed, and after another conversation with Susan immediately after our workout, I felt exhausted. But the third session with Nain brought the breakthrough I had hoped for. As soon as she undressed, she said, Justin, I need to undress you. With the help of soothing words, Nain soon had me completely undressed. We can move on to the next step, she said. Let's go to bed. Don't be nervous, Justin. They'll make sure everything goes perfectly, Nain said. I followed her instructions exactly. Her warm voice and mesmerizing presence made the task easier. I expected to be nervous, but this experience quickly tempered my fears. I thought about Ginger from time to time, and it bothered me a little, but I quickly realized that Nain was much more grateful and enthusiastic than Ginger. Hugs are very important for women. Almost all of them like it, Nain said. When she made this last remark, a big smile spread across my face, and I felt a surge of inspiration. Wow, I aroused the interest of an intimate therapist, I thought. As we walked back to Susan's office, I noted that our session lasted 80 minutes. This time, Nain joined me on the couch and took my hand. She shared her thoughts about the session with Susan, and they both looked very happy. Susan asked us a lot of questions and then suggested that we have 2 more sessions instead of the 3 that were originally planned. I felt disappointed because I realized that Nain would only allow me intimacy as part of therapy, but I accepted the offer. The next 2 sessions with her were incredible. In the 3 hours I spent in her caring arms, my self-confidence increased. She did a great job as a supportive partner. In fact, she surpassed anyone I'd ever worked with in helping me achieve my goals. Susan announced that I was almost cured. I feel amazing, Susan. How do you rate my progress? I asked. You're feeling euphoric right now, but in the coming weeks, you may start to miss Nain and doubt your confidence in relationships with other women. It is important for you to make a new connection as soon as possible, preferably with an experienced partner who can meet your needs and teach you what Nain could not do for ethical reasons. Then the final test awaits you, Susan replied calmly. The last test? I asked. Let's make an appointment for the next meeting in 4 months, and then I'll explain everything, Susan said. Do you have any potential partners in mind? She asked. To be honest, I'm not sure, I replied. At work and at the gym, there are several women who have shown interest in me at different times, but they are younger, and I have not communicated with them. Maybe they think I'm not interested in women at all. I haven't had an active social life in the last 2 years, so maybe I won't be able to follow your advice, I said sadly. Susan paused. Justin, I may have problems if this information gets out and people misunderstand my intentions, But I have a suggestion for you. It will require financial investments on your part, Susan said. Are you interested in listening to this, or should I not continue? She asked. I paused for a moment. Susan was incredibly professional and did a great job, so I didn't say no. Is she an escort? I asked. No way. My friend is in a difficult situation, Susan said quietly. I'm listening, I replied. Her name is Brittany. She is 48 years old. She just went through bankruptcy and a divorce. Of course, I can't share all the details, but she urgently needs a place to live. If she doesn't find a decent job soon, she will have to leave the city and move in with her elderly parents. Unfortunately, the only job available to her right now is as a maid, as her ex-husband and former boss have tarnished her reputation, Susan said. Isn't she too old for me? I asked. It's just that I won't turn 29 until next week, I added, a little puzzled. Let me tell you something, Susan replied. Here is her number. They'll call you right now while you're here to make sure her service is still active. Can you have dinner with her tomorrow? If you don't feel connected after meeting her, just leave. I won't be offended. But if you like her, tell her directly what you need in terms of education, housing, food, and entertainment, Susan said. I thought for a moment, what was I missing? I realized that I had nothing to lose and decided to act. The next evening, I met Brittany for dinner at a restaurant. She was hard to miss, with her stunning fiery red hair, voluptuous figure, and slim waist. Although her face could not be called traditionally beautiful, it was warm, attractive, and friendly. I was amazed at how quickly we found a common language. It seemed that a connection had instantly formed between us. After dinner, we walked around the park and found a bench to continue the conversation. I'm not sure Susan has told me much about why I wanted to meet you, I said. Not much, just that you are her patient and that we could support each other. Although I don't quite understand what she meant, Brittany replied, confused. I brought her up to date a little bit and saw how her face changed. Brittany replied firmly, I refuse to work to sell my love, no matter how difficult my circumstances may be. I replied, trying to keep a professional tone. How about not moving into my apartment? I have a one-bedroom apartment in a nice area of the city. If you cook and clean, I can provide for you. When we have a closer relationship, I can take advantage of your insight. I will be happy to help you realize your career aspirations or any other goals you have. I will draw up a contract with you stating that, in exchange for your cooking, I will not be able to evict you without giving you 6 weeks' notice. Brittany was silent for almost 2 minutes before finally responding with a cheerful, okay. We exchanged smiles and shook hands. After signing the contract, I helped her move a few things to my apartment on Saturday, and we both had smiles on our faces. The platonic relationship lasted only 2 days. I had a great weekend with her, and it was clear that she felt the same way. On Monday, when I returned home from work, she had just come out of the shower after a daily workout, which explained her toned hips that were hard to miss. She was wrapped in a towel. I didn't know you were coming so early, she said, her eyes widening in surprise. I left work early to see if I could invite you to dinner, I replied, not taking my eyes off her, as the towel barely covered her. But what? She asked, grinning playfully. At that moment, I felt bolder than ever. I'd love to have dinner here with you, I said. Brittany let go of the towel, and it was the beginning of an incredibly passionate chapter in my life. She opened my eyes to what a woman wants and how she can bring me joy. I significantly reduced my working hours because I really wanted to be with Brittany. My job allowed me to be flexible without negatively influencing others. I earned a little less, but after 2 years of hard work, I had more than enough savings. Over the next 4 months, I can honestly say there wasn't a single day that Brittany and I didn't have at least one intimate moment. I funded her vocational training, bought beautiful clothes for her, and in return, she cooked for us when we stayed at home and kept our apartment clean. When I met Susan again, she looked at me with a playful smile and asked, well, how are things with Brittany? Absolutely wonderful. We're not in love, but our physical connection is definitely satisfying, I said, beaming. Susan smiled back at me. Yesterday, I talked to Brittany on the phone. I asked her to give you an honest assessment as a partner on a scale from 1 to 10. Are you interested in her answer? Susan asked. I hesitated for a moment. It was a turning point. Yes, I want to know, I finally replied. Brittany gave you a 9, Susan said. It seems like if there was ever a time when 2 plus was true, and I'm not sure it was ever true, then those days are long gone, Susan said, beaming. I had mixed feelings, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. In the end, Susan decided to ask a few questions. "So what will you do next? What are your plans with Brittany?" asked Susan. "She finishes her vocational training in a month and hopes that soon after that, she will have her own place and a job. Although we both really like our physical connection, I would rate it a solid 10 without any doubt. It is obvious that our relationship is not designed to last. I just wanted to know if I needed any more sessions," I asked. "No," Susan said, "but there is one last step if you want to achieve complete, unconditional success," Susan said. She stared into the distance for a moment, rocking slightly in her chair, before turning her gaze to me. "For the final part of therapy, to make sure that you are completely healed, you need to make love to Ginger again. Do you agree to this?" asked Susan. I was stunned. It was the last thing I expected. "What?" I asked, trying to regain my composure to confront my last demons. She replied, "I don't mean that you should resume your marriage or continue a long-term relationship with her. I mean you should demonstrate your capabilities and observe how her reaction has changed. It is important for you to see these changes firsthand. Otherwise, you will always doubt. This is the best advice I can give. Take the time to reflect on this. As for us, our joint work has been completed, and it was very pleasant to have you as a patient. I am glad for your success and wish you all the best," Susan said with a warm smile, getting up. "Thank you, Susan. You were great," I said. "You and Nain were great," I added, holding out my hand for a handshake. But instead of shaking hands, she laughed and came over to hug me tightly. I hugged her back, feeling awkward in my soul. Since I appreciated Brittany as an experienced woman, something I couldn't discuss with my mother, I decided to ask her about Susan's latest assignment. I already mentioned that Susan's previous assignment brought me closer to you, and it turned out to be wonderful. But do you think it's really possible to complete this last task? I asked Brittany. "Absolutely," Brittany replied casually. "There's no reason why she wouldn't want to check if you've changed," she added. "Don't you think she hates me?" I asked. I can't say for sure, but the fact is that Susan has never made mistakes with her clients in the past. So why not take a chance? Why not put her theory to the test? Asked Brittany. "The problem is, Ginger lives 500 miles away from me, and I don't even know how to start a conversation," I said uncertainly. "Don't worry about it," Brittany said with a laugh. "He'll stop bothering you in 2 months. You rent an apartment every month and have repeatedly said that you want to move back to your hometown. As for the relationship with her, you've been married to her for 5 years. You should know how to contact her. If it's hard for you, why not call one of her friends, like Sybil, who threw that party that knocked your confidence down?" Brittany said. I shrugged my shoulders and replied, "I think he'll agree." 2 months later, I got my old job in my hometown. After making sure that Sybil and Ashley would keep my communication with them confidential, I learned that Ginger doesn't date men very often and is trying her best to move on. Most likely, she will be ready to listen to me. Brittany received positive feedback from the employment instructors and got an ideal position to help her. I paid 2 months in advance so that she would have a place to stay until she found a more permanent place to live. I decided to leave my furniture to Brittany since transporting it would be more trouble than it would be useful, and she would need it. Brittany was interested in a lot of guys, so I knew that after I left, it wouldn't be difficult for her to find someone. A few days before my move, Brittany and I went to a mountain resort for a long weekend. Although we didn't go fishing, hiking, or sightseeing, we certainly had a good time together and broke the bed in our room. We said goodbye with tears in our eyes, wishing each other all the best. Less than a week after I moved in, Sybil, still feeling guilty for her role in our divorce, accidentally arranged a meeting between Ginger and me at a nearby mall. Sybil called me on my cell phone to tell me which store she and Ginger were going to. I was casually browsing through clothes at the entrance to the store when Sybil and Ginger walked in. Sybil exclaimed, then turned to Ginger and said, "Damn it." I pretended to be surprised, but greeted them warmly. "Ginger, Sybil, I'm so glad to see you," I said happily. "When did you arrive in the city? Are you just visiting?" asked Sybil. "I moved here this week. I'm back in town, hopefully for good," I replied, trying to keep a smile on my face. "Why didn't you call us?" asked Sybil. "Why are you procrastinating?" asked Sybil, with a note of irritation in her voice. I was trying to muster up the courage to speak. "I really wanted to call you, Ginger, but I was worried about how you would react. To be honest, I wasn't sure if you'd ever want to see me again," I admitted, feeling awkward. "Of course you will. exclaimed Sybil with a big smile. Ginger stood there, looking like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she stuttered, Justin, why don't you take Ginger to one of the restaurants at the mall? Sybil asked, supporting Ginger. We were just going to eat soon, Sybil said. Just call me if you need me to pick up Ginger later, and I'll take you home myself, I said quickly. That's if you let me take you to lunch, Ginger, I added. Okay, Ginger replied softly, wiping away the tears that had gathered. The first few minutes Ginger and I spent together at the restaurant were the most awkward of my life. Neither of us wanted to address the obvious tension, so we limited ourselves to general questions about how we were doing and what was new, after which there was an awkward silence. Just as I was about to ask for the bill, Ginger suddenly said, I've missed you, Justin. I hope we can become friends, Ginger said hopefully. I'm not looking for friendship with you, Ginger, I replied sharply. Her expression changed, but I continued, but I'd like to date you. A small smile flashed across Ginger's face, but she hesitantly replied, I don't know. You really offended me when you divorced me. I felt my face flush with anger. Wait a minute. I thought it was you who cheated on me and disrespected me in front of your friends. Maybe I remembered it wrong, I said, startled. With that, I got up, threw two $20 bills on the table, and left, annoyed with myself for ruining everything and even angrier at Ginger for her thoughtless remark. As I was leaving the restaurant, she managed to catch up with me. She pinned me against the wall, and before I could react, she wrapped her arms around my neck and started kissing me. Between kisses, she whispered, I'm sorry I pushed you away. I have to admit, the kisses were just great. Ginger was always a good kisser. In the end, she pulled away and said, Yes, I would love to go on a date with you. I wanted to ask when, but part of me wanted to lash out at her and say something rude. Instead, I kept calm and suggested, how about Saturday night? I can pick you up at 7 o'clock and take you to Nose Styles for dinner and dancing. That sounds great, she smiled. I can show you where I live when you take me home, she said, squeezing my hand. As I drove to her apartment building, unlike the one where we used to live together, she invited me to go inside and inspect her apartment, but I refused. When I picked up Ginger on Saturday, it was obvious that she had put a lot of effort into looking stunning. She seemed a little embarrassed when I decided to wait outside while she did the finishing touches, but she didn't talk about it. When Ginger finally appeared, I couldn't identify her outfit, but it perfectly accentuated her stunning figure. She applied just the right amount of makeup, and the eyeshadow highlighted her mesmerizing blue eyes. It felt like a first date, even though we had known each other for ages. We had a wonderful evening with dinner and dancing, sharing a few slow dances along the way. When I took her home, she surprised me by inviting me into the house. It was my opportunity to show what I'm capable of and then leave. I don't know exactly why I hesitated, but I just couldn't bring myself to enter her apartment. I could see the genuine disappointment on Ginger's face, but her expression changed when I invited her to join me at the play on Tuesday night. She readily agreed. For the next 3 weeks, we met 3 or 4 evenings every week. While we were kissing, I never went beyond touching her breasts over her clothes, and I skillfully pulled her hand away when she tried to seduce me. I also never set foot in her apartment. Although I played mind games with Ginger, I found that I was causing myself as much emotional distress as she was. Despite the fact that at the same time, I was in a relationship with 2 other women living in the neighborhood, throughout this period, we avoided discussing the details of our divorce. The situation reached a critical point one Sunday afternoon when we were returning from a baseball game. Ginger suggested visiting the park where we spent time together during our marriage. When we settled down on our favorite bench, away from the hustle and bustle of the park, Ginger opened up. Why don't you want to come to my house, Justin? She asked. I replied, because, Ginger, there may be reminders of our marriage memories that I'd rather leave behind. She replied, you might be surprised to learn that there is nothing left of our former life in my apartment. All the furniture has been replaced, and the photos have been hidden, Ginger said. Oh, I said, genuinely surprised. Why didn't you invite me to your place? If you don't want to come to my place, Justin, asked Ginger. Because it's sure to end up with us making love, and I don't want to let you down, I replied dispassionately. An expression of suffering appeared on Ginger's face, and tears glistened in her eyes. Justin, I understand that you may not want to discuss what happened between us, but I need to do this. If you try to leave, I will hold on and try to convey my feelings to you. For me, love has always been more important than anything else, and I really loved you. I'm really sorry that I hurt you, and I can't tell you how much I struggled with it. I hope you'll think about giving us another chance, especially since we've seen each other more than a dozen times since your return, Ginger said. Maybe I've changed so much, and I don't think you'll like it, I said. Maybe now I'm more focused on physical attraction than on love, I replied evasively. I want to find out, she said excitedly. Then let's go to your place, I suggested, and Ginger beamed with delight. I've replayed this scenario in my mind countless times, imagining it like a navigator plotting important routes or a striker imagining how to score a goal. My thoughts included, among other things, everything I had done to Brittany, which seemed to numb her. As soon as we entered Ginger's apartment, I kissed her. Still kissing, I lifted her and threw her onto the couch. The mission was completed. We made love. I was sure it was the most incredible physical experience she had ever had. With that, I completed Susan's last assignment and was ready to move on. But then I wondered if I really wanted to. About 2 hours later, Ginger called. Hi, Justin. I just wanted to thank you for completely changing my world. I've never experienced anything like this before, she said. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I asked, confused. I wasn't shocked by her words. It was so far beyond the good that it seemed like it belonged to another realm. I would really like you to stay and cuddle with me, Ginger said. It was just physical pleasure, Ginger, I replied. I liked it too, I confessed. She paused for a moment before replying. Oh. After a long silence, she asked, would you like to come over for dinner on Tuesday night? What for? Dessert? I replied, surprised. Whatever you want, and I mean anything, Justin, she said. Good. What time should I come in? I asked. Maybe at 6 o'clock, suggested Ginger. Of course. See you then, I replied. On Tuesday, as I walked to Ginger's apartment, I could feel the excitement in the air. After that day, we maintained an intense relationship for the next 6 weeks. Ginger never directly compared our current intimacy with the one during our marriage, probably to avoid returning to painful memories. But she often talked about feeling happy and satisfied. Interestingly, while enjoying the time I spent with her, I discovered that she had fallen in love with me again. Although I had almost dealt with the problems that caused our breakup, deep down, I was still worried about whether Ginger realized the extent of the pain she had caused me. Perhaps my response to this concern wasn't the most mature, but I felt it was important for her to understand my pain before we could continue the relationship. I got a chance to make sure that she shared my feelings on Sunday morning. Just as I was preparing to return to my apartment after breakfast, she said that she needed to discuss something with me. Justin, the last thing I want to do is escalate the situation, especially since I've been the happiest in my life for the last 2 months. But I got a promotion in another city, Ginger said. I need to understand if we have a future. Because if there is, then I will definitely refuse the promotion. But if not, then I have to move on. She looked worried, biting her lip. Okay, I said, shrugging my shoulders. What do you mean? Asked Ginger. Without hesitation, I answered. Ginger, I still have feelings for you, but intimacy is crucial to me, and I don't think we're compatible in this area for a future together. You don't suit me completely intimately. I'm really sorry. Perhaps you should consider accepting this promotion, I said coldly. Ginger was shocked. Her eyes widened, and tears streamed down her face. I got up, kissed her on the forehead, and suggested we meet again before she moved. After that, I turned around and left, making sure the door was closed behind me. I treated this traitor the way she treated me. I hurt her and lowered her self-esteem. Now, she was completely broken and may seek counseling from a psychotherapist. And that's the end of the story. Thank you for your valuable time. Give me your generous likes, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.